Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. Boris Tizenghausen is with you. July 31st. Here are the main news stories at this moment. In Russia, after Wildberries, it's now Ozon's turn. I think many people in Russia are now starting to realize that everyone will have to pay for the war. The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, with the call sign MADYAR, wrote the following today. The concentration of ozone against the backdrop of a poor wild berry harvest exceeds the critical norm. We will fix it. Let me remind you, Wildberries translates as wild berry. Well, in general, I think the hint is clear. And it's absolutely obvious that after Wildberries, Ozon should be next, and then Yandex, Market. In short, they're all going to burn. And then on down the list. And today, the 9th Wildberries warehouse in Russia burned down, this time in Volgograd. A logistics complex with an area of 44,000 square meters was hit. This is a key hub for the Volgograd, Astrakhan, and neighboring regions. The warehouse is engulfed in flames and continues to burn. I think it will burn down completely. Let's watch the video.
Ситуация страшная. Небо над Волгоградом. 5 утра, полпятого. Вildberries горит. Работающий нет. Вот все живы были, коллеги мои. Я сейчас просто оглянулась, на крыше стою. Смотрю, там вдалеке. Тоже что-то горит. Сейчас.
A security cordon has been set up at the scene. Law enforcement is catching operators and film crews to prevent them from filming up close. But that's not all. One of the largest oil refineries in the Russian Federation has also been hit, Lukoil Volgograd Refinery, as it's called. There's a massive fire there. The processing capacity of this refinery is about 15 million tons of oil per year. It is among the top 10 largest oil refineries in Russia, right there in Volgograd. Well, basically, drones hit several locations at once today, and that's still far from everything. In Volgograd, by the way, drivers have already lined up in advance at gas stations. You see how the reflex kicks in already. Today there was also a strike on a Wildberries facility in Zelenodolsk. That's in Tatarstan. So go ahead and put some brilliant green on your forehead there at the warehouse in Zelenodolsk. Since they've zeroed in on the warehouse, it means it'll burn down soon as well. Literally a couple of drones flew in there for a test. They hit the industrial zone. And just for a second, the distance to Zelenodolsk is over 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. But this just means that's it. Goodbye to another warehouse, the 10th one. And also, here's an important point. Today, the Ozon warehouse was also hit. There as well, in Zelenodolsk. Though to be precise, I think it wasn't exactly the Ozon warehouse, but the strike landed right next to it as a test shot. You know, just so Wildberries wouldn't feel left out. So basically, Ozon can also just lie down and cover itself with a sheet. But that's not all yet. There were explosions today, powerful explosions in the area of the crucial port of Kaspiysk. And this time, it wasn't not just fierce drones that showed up there, but our combat unmanned crop dusters. Basically, there's action all over Russia. Everything's burning, everything's exploding. Russians reported today that 11 regions were under attack today. The balding rat, I think, is already hiding somewhere on the minus 30th floor, just in case. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It's important for the channel's promotion. You can subscribe right now without delay. Let me remind you, we are fighting against Putin's propaganda. It's not easy, because Putin spends insane amounts of money on his propaganda. But the truth is on our side, so subscribe. And the more of us there are, the less effect Putin's propaganda has. For the first time in 5 years, internet entrepreneurs in Russia have started shutting down by the thousands. This is not a joke. And by the way, it's not just connected to the strikes on Wildberries warehouses. For the first time since 2021, the Russian economy has faced a decline in the number of entrepreneurs working in the e-commerce sector. Just in the first half of this year, the number of these entrepreneurs decreased by 24,000. Not only has the number of people working in e-commerce decreased, but the number of new business openings has also plummeted by 25%. That's it, no one wants to work online anymore. Well, of course, Putin doesn't use the internet, so Russians don't need it either. In general, for e-commerce to start shrinking by tens of thousands of businesses, you really have to try very hard to make that happen. But as you can see, Putin is trying. Among young people in Russia, I think many already understand that there is no future. Or rather, there is a future, but most likely it's not a bright one. To die in yet another war started by yet another Putin. That is, it might not be this Putin, it could be his successor, Kabainish or Kabainok. I'm not sure which is correct. In short, new technologies, social networks, Instagram, artificial intelligence, forget about them. Red folders with strings, payphones, surveillance, wiretapping. That's what you'll have to remember. Look at North Korea now and accept that this is what you'll have in a few years. That is, unless you get rid of this Botox jellyfish. Only approved websites with the most blatant propaganda, an iron curtain, including an electronic one, and even a physical one too. So if you want to listen to alternative news or read Western sources, you'll definitely get a fine or even jail time, just like in the USSR. That's what Putin dreams of. The biggest, the greatest catastrophe was the collapse of the Soviet Union, as Putin said. Remember? And it will be just like back then. If you listen to Voice of America, Radio Liberty, or the BBC, that's it. Well, to be precise, just listening might not have been punished too harshly. But if you listened and then retold what you heard, you'd get charged under Article 70 of the RSFSR Criminal Code, anti-Soviet agitation and propaganda, up to 7 years in the camps. By the way, there are already new videos appearing related to those warehouses that are burning, with Russians lamenting again. Everything is burning again. Everything is lost again. Everything is lost again. Or rather, everything was lost when the underground heel attacked Ukraine. That was the time to record hundreds and thousands of videos. But now what's the point? By the way, a complete and prolonged shutdown of the entire warehouse network of Wildberries and Ozon would be an extremely heavy blow to Russia's internal commercial structure in recent decades, and a powerful blow to the military budget as well. But there is a sense that this is exactly what will happen soon. And Ukraine is simply performing an incredible feat. This is how you asymmetrically break a giant enemy who surpasses you in numbers and resources. Ukraine is simply accomplishing something incredible. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the defense forces of Ukraine. Today, we continue raising funds for the fighters of the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, named after hero of Ukraine Dmytro Kotsiubailo, the legendary Da Vinci. The fundraiser is for vehicle repairs. The fighters are serving on the Zaporizhzhia front and have recorded a special video for you. Please take a look.
Вітаємо здоров'я. Ми, бійці підрозділу радіоелектронної боротьби 1-го окремого штурмового полку імені Героя України Дмитра Коцюбайла Да Вінчі, знову звертаємось до вас, пане Борисе, до ваших підписників за допомогою у зборі коштів на ремонт нашої автомобільної техніки. Будемо щиро вдячні кожному вашому донату, адже кожний ваш донат – це важливий крок до перемоги. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Let's help our fighters from the legendary 1st Assault Regiment named after Da Vinci. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are mono, private, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. There is a QR code in the corner for those watching me on other channels. To everyone who supports us, I want to say a special thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, from myself, and from the hundreds and hundreds of warriors you have already helped. You are simply incredible. And the Polish Ministry of Defense has confirmed that a Russian missile fell on the country's territory. This was stated by the country's Deputy Minister of Defense, Cezary Tomczyk. Let me quote, "We can confirm with full responsibility that it was a Russian Kh-101 missile, that is, a cruise missile capable of carrying even nuclear warheads, and this missile exploded upon impact with the ground." Indeed, Cezary Tomczyk is right. The Kh-101 missile does have a nuclear version. That is, it's called the Kh-102, that's the variant. And no one knew what kind of missile was flying into Poland or what it was equipped with until it fell and the wreckage was examined. So theoretically, it could have been a Russian Kh-102 missile in its nuclear configuration. According to Cezary Tomczyk, the Russian military launched about 70 missiles, 20 of which were headed toward Poland. These missiles were shot down by Ukrainian forces over Ukraine, Tomczyk noted. However, one of the missiles could not be shot down because the Ukrainian pilot risked violating Polish airspace. At the same time, by the way, a representative of the Polish Ministry of Defense did not rule out that the missiles aimed at Poland were launched intentionally. Well, everything has been clarified. The question is, what will the reaction be going forward? We've already seen 20 drones in Poland and now 20 missiles headed toward Poland, with one of them equipped with a fully operational warhead, flying in and penetrating 61 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. Does anyone doubt that this wasn't accidental? Not so long ago, there were calls in Russia to strike Western countries, remember? Yes, those calls are still being made. That little bottle Van Helsing, Medvedev, even showed a list of targets he was planning to strike, which enterprises specifically. I've always said that a mirror response is the bare minimum that can be done to the Russian Federation, that at least it would make Putin hesitate, but it's better to respond in multiples, to return it many times over. If you forgive them for one missile, soon 3 will come, then 10, then 20. But our partners do have certain concerns. That is, if they do exist, it's clear that no one is going to fire back at the Kaliningrad region and say, oops, our missile accidentally flew in during exercises. Right now, everyone actually has a unique opportunity. Take advantage of the moment. Give or sell Ukraine whatever you want to use to strike the Russian Federation, and Ukraine will take revenge for you. And Ukraine will even thank you for it. In other words, right now there's a unique chance to get back at that mangy muskrat for all these nasty tricks. And believe me, Ukrainians will do it in such a way that it won't seem like enough to them. By the way, new problems have crept up in Russia. The budget deficit has already reached 7 trillion. See how it keeps growing and growing. But now I'll tell you how they plan to cover this deficit. What does a 7 trillion deficit mean? It means that Sberbank, or rather a representative of Sberbank, has called on Russians to prepare for a new tax increase in 2027. The Russian authorities, as part of preparing the budget for next year, are planning an additional tax increase, said Sber's chief financial officer, Taras Skvortsov. Well, did anyone really doubt that? Given the huge hole in the budget, it would be Russians whose taxes would be raised? So, Putin has two options: end the war or raise taxes on Russians. What does Putin choose? Someone has to pay for the war. It's not going to be Kabaeva or, I don't know, Kovalchuk doing that. It will be Russians, which is why their taxes will be raised. By the way, entrepreneurs from Wildberries are once again asking for compensation for tax holidays. Here's your answer. There will be no tax holidays. There will be even bigger tax increases. And as for compensation, well, you'll get maybe 2%, maybe 5%. It would be laughable to assume that Putin would actually care about Russians. He's a psychopath with an absolutely maniacal idea to sacrifice another million, and another million in this war to achieve his own goals. And taxes will be raised to squeeze the last out of Russians. Here's another piece of news, by the way. The Russian authorities are preparing to cut benefits for businesses due to the budget deficit. And they'll take from businesses as well. Entrepreneurs will be required to install special software. It's called Tax 3, like Terminator 2, only it's Tax 3. This will allow the tax authorities to monitor companies' financial status in real time. So now all entrepreneurs are under a magnifying glass. And what does that mean? It means additional fines for any discrepancy, for any violation. Get your wallets ready. By the way, Sberbank has been churning out alarming news lately. So here's another statement from Sber. Sberbank announced a shortage of rubles at banks due to a record outflow into cash. The ruble shortage is being observed because of a record-breaking outflow into cash. The same bank's chief financial officer, Skvortsov, also stated, since the beginning of July, the amount of cash in circulation has increased by almost 600 billion rubles. This is an absolute record, and this July, the monthly figure is the highest in history. And you know what this means? That despite all the statements from the bold mackerel about record pig iron production, about how the rye and winter crops are flourishing and all the rest, Russians didn't believe it, and some of them are simply withdrawing their money from the banks. And naturally, trust in the banking system is also falling. You know what's surprising? At the very same time, literally at the same moment, while Sberbank is sending out black and brown swans one after another, Putin crawls out of his bunker and talks about how the Russian economy is getting stronger, not by the day, but by the hour. And he says this with a straight face. At the same time, he's destroying entire sectors of the economy. Today, I came across a very interesting compilation. It turns out that the largest steel companies in Russia have reported record profit crashes. He killed the coal industry. He killed the automotive industry. This is Putin. He's the destroyer of everything, really. So the steel industry is one of the key sectors of the Russian Federation's industry. Let's stick to the facts so nothing is made up. Novolipetsk steel plant, more than half of its profits lost. Severstal reported a ninefold drop in profits. And as for the Magnitogorsk iron and steel works, it has become unprofitable altogether. Meanwhile, the old man pumped himself full of Botox again and is yelling, hissing from the podium, "We need to be bolder. Let's hurry up and go to war." Russia has started importing gasoline from Morocco. Yes, a maritime shipment of AI-92 gasoline, totaling 30,000 tons, was received by the Russian Federation from Morocco, according to two industry sources cited by Reuters. Be bolder, go ahead. Russia is buying gasoline from Morocco. This is just surreal. Prices are rising, warehouses are burning, refineries are shutting down. But for Putin, everything is bolder, everything is going according to plan. And not a single bold politician who, like Nemtsov once did, would say, "He's just sick, that's all?" Well, Nemtsov put it differently, but maybe children are watching us. Putin is mentally unwell. He's just going to ruin everyone. How did this puny little cigarette butt manage to intimidate such a huge country? By the way, in the 5th year of the full-scale invasion, and let me remind you that according to Russian propaganda, everything was supposed to go exactly like this, all according to plan, they finally decided to tell the residents of the Moscow region where their bomb shelters are located. But why now? What's going on? And why do the residents of the Moscow region need shelters from missiles and drones? So they published a map where residents of the Moscow region can now see where to run if it's not just drones flying anymore. Everything is definitely going according to plan. But that's in the Moscow region. In Moscow itself, it's a big secret where the shelters are located. No one has told anyone anything so far. Just stay at home, everything is calm, everything is fine. In general, the very fact that Moscow is expecting missile strikes says a lot. And there's one more piece of news I just couldn't ignore. In a fraud case, a dollar billionaire in Russia, the chairman of the board of directors of the EFCO group, Valery Kustov, as well as several top managers of his company, have been detained. By the way, these are the very same managers who, just a year ago, were showing and telling Putin how Russia was making great strides in the development of unmanned systems. According to the investigation, instead of developing their own Russian drones, the suspects were purchasing ready-made Chinese drones and presenting them as domestic developments, receiving government funding for this. We are talking about the Transport of the Future project, which was supposed to become one of the flagships of the Russian UAV industry. The most interesting thing is that in Russia, they just as officially rebrand not only Chinese drones, but also Chinese cars, and pass them off as Russian Moskvich vehicles. And another interesting point is that Putin's old friends are allowed to pull off schemes like this, but people like Kustov have to answer for everything. I recently showed you a fragment from an old video where the head of Rostec, Chemezov, presented Medvedev with a new Russian smartphone. And back then Medvedev said, "Oh, what a nice one, but whose parts are these?" And Chemezov replied, "Well, the parts are foreign and the assembly is done abroad. So how is this any different?" Moreover, a significant amount of funding was allocated for the Yotaphone program, the first Russian smartphone. Just so you understand, at least $50 million was spent on developing the first two devices. In reality, in fact, they were assembled from foreign parts on foreign equipment in Singapore. So what kind of Russian smartphone is this? But Chemezov can get away with it. After all, he's known Putin since their KGB days in East Germany. In other words, under Putin, the embezzlement of state funds has reached truly astronomical proportions. Funds were allocated for development for various programs. In reality, they showcased finished products, most often Chinese, which they passed off as Russian developments. There are dozens and dozens of such cases. Everything that Russia is currently launching at Ukraine is either a legacy from the USSR or technologies that were transferred by other countries during the war, as was the case with the Iranian drones, for example. But the products created by Chemezov, Putin's friend, and Rostec are simply unviable. Remember the Armata tank, for example. Where is he, Chemezov? Where is the Armata tank? But in Russia, there is a caste of untouchables. These are Putin's close friends, his former colleagues, his friends, his family. They are allowed to do anything. The main thing is to be loyal to their Führer. Well, we hope that Putin, just like his idol once did, will soon end his life in a bunker as well. And then, I have a feeling that when this happens, tens of millions of people in this world, maybe even hundreds of millions, will pop open champagne and say, now that's when a real triple hooray will be heard. And you, friends, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let's help our soldiers from the 1st Separate Assault Regiment. They are now on one of the hottest fronts, the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, named after the legendary Da Vinci. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine!